Okay, so here's a couple slides. I don't have too many slides. We're going to get into some practical and switch back and forth between the boring old slideshow and some actual code. So this is about me. My name is Megan McDermott. My company is called Woolwich WebWorks. We do custom web development in Waterloo, Ontario, or wherever you are. I've been working with Drupal since 2007. That's right around the time Drupal 6 came out. I'm a front-end specialist. I do design and UX and front-end development. And this is part 2 of the show. We're going to go a little bit deeper this time, and now we've split it out into 2 sections. I can do a whole session on templating and Twig. We're going to talk about how to override templates, how to customize Drupal's output, and how to use Twig to manipulate content in the template files. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about how Drupal templating actually works. And for people who are new to Drupal, this can be a little bit difficult to get your head around, especially if you're coming from a WordPress background. The templating is sort of the structure of how the templating works is kind of structurally different, and it can be a little bit difficult for people to understand. So the HTML templates in Twig have a series of overrides, and the most specific template will be used. And I think this will make a little bit more sense in a couple of minutes. You only have to override the code that you need. You don't need to create a whole suite of templates for every little bit of HTML that Drupal outputs. You just need to override in your theme the parts that you want to change from either your base theme. So we talked about last week choosing a base theme. Then you can use file name variations to provide it. This makes more sense in a minute. Hold on, here we go. Let's skip to this slide. This is a diagram of how the Drupal theming structure works, the templating structure actually works. So what we have is a sort of series of nesting of templates, and each bit of HTML that Drupal outputs has a template file in Drupal 8. This wasn't always the case. Prior to Drupal 8, there was some that you could only modify using pre-processed functions and some that had template files, and it was really confusing. You didn't really know what method you were going to have to use to override some HTML or even add a class to something. It was pretty confusing. So Drupal 8 has straightened that out, and everything has a template file. If you look into Classy's template directory, you'll see lots and lots of template files there, and that's all the little bits of HTML code that Drupal outputs. And as you can see here, that's all nested together. So you start out with the HTML template, which just has the HTML head, the body opening tag, and the body closing tag, and HTML. And then inside that, you have your page template file, and we're going to look at that in a little bit. And that's where you put in your regions, which we defined in our info file last week. And it's really just the basic overall page layout. So it'll include the region for your header, the region for your content, the region for your footer. And that's pretty much it. A little bit of, wrapper markup, whatever you need to make your layout work. So it's really pretty simple. And then inside that, your sidebar is a region, your footer is a region, and then you have your content, and that is whatever is providing the main content for that page. For a node, it's the node. For a view, it would be a view. For a taxonomy term, it's page, it's the taxonomy term. So it's just depends on what kind of a page that you're looking at is what's providing that main content section. Page title even has a template file in Drupal 8. It's a block, and it has its own template file, so you might want to be able to manipulate that too. And this is a little bit of a difference showing how this works in WordPress. So if you're coming from WordPress world, it's really, really different. So in WordPress, you have these templates for a single post, for a page, there's one for category or archive, and they all start with getting the header and getting the footer, and then they do different things in here for the content depending on what type of a page that you're looking at. So, and I think this isn't entirely accurate, but you kind of get an idea of how this works differently, and that single actually starts from the very top. Each page starts with including the header and doing something that it's going to get where it's going to get the content. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because people who are new to Drupal tend to have this impulse to think about things in terms of pages and overriding a page template, which you actually almost never need to do in Drupal, because the page template really just includes your regions. And if you want to manipulate something, it's probably what's actually sitting in here. It's probably the node. or a region, or maybe you want to put a different block in that region or display it differently or something like that. You can really do almost everything you need to do by configuring what's showing up in those regions and on what pages, or, you know, doing something within the node template. You almost never need to override the page template file. So I think that's kind of a misconception, and I've seen a lot of people who are new to Drupal try and customize the page template like crazy. But you don't need to do that in Drupal world, especially if you just want to change something that's happening in the content, or that could be configured using blocks. So the next part of this equation, we have template files, and inside those template files is Twig. And Twig is what Drupal 8 uses to output the content into the template file. And there's a little example. It's really straightforward, easy to read. If title, print the title, and the if statement. And maybe there's some reason why that title isn't output on that specific page. It's always good practice to wrap things in conditionals just to make sure that it's not going to throw an error if that, for some reason, that's not there. And I have a link to Sensio Labs where the Twig, you can find the Twig documentation. Converting to Twig was one of these get off the islands kind of strategies for Drupal 8, where we want to get away from doing things that are really specific to Drupal and people outside of Drupal don't understand it, and we're kind of sharing these technologies with other development communities, which is really good. Drupal has a lot more in common now with outer PHP or other development communities than it used to. So here's how we output content into a template file, and this is kind of how you'd put content into your node file or things like that, whatever, a taxonomy term or an entity template. And this is kind of comparing how we would do that in WordPress, for example. I think this is what's outputting the content in WordPress single post template. It's pretty confusing to me. I'm not a PHP developer, so I don't even know what the sprintf thing is, and I think this continue reading is what we would call the more link, but I don't really get it. Maybe that's just from the 2015, the core theme for WordPress, but I don't know. This is pretty confusing to me. And in Drupal 7, it was pretty confusing for some people too. You had to render something, and one of the core things to understand about Drupal is that all the content is stored in an array. So when we're accessing content parts in a template file, you're really just drilling through an array. And as we'll see in a little bit, you can really drill through the content arrays in Twig pretty deeply and do all kinds of interesting things with it. So in Drupal 8, we just have this nice little squirrely brackets with content, and that's all you need to do to render content in a template file. So it's a lot easier to understand and work with. So in a minute, we're finally going to look at a template file, the page template file. And this is probably the first template that you're going to want to override for your theme. So you can put in the regions that you've defined and your overall structure that you need to create your layout. And as we'll see, each template has a selection of variables that are available to it. And each template file from the default will include a nice long list of that and a comment at the top of the template file, so you can see exactly what's available. There's also a couple of debugging methods that we can use to check out what content information is there that you can use. So let's go into our sorry, I have to get back to where I was. Okay, so here's my directory where my website is. I have a pretty vanilla Drupal 8 install. One of the things I'm going to do, actually, and here's our leprechaun theme that we made last time. Pretty basic theme. It's got some regions. It's got an info file. It's got a library file. So I'm going to remind myself when I go switch to my code here, which regions we had defined. Keep it really basic. Header, admin area, main menu, content, sidebar, and footer. So now I'm going to have to make sure that those are output in a page template file. I haven't created any template files yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my base theme, which was classy. So we go to core. all the magical core files in here. Classy, here's all of Classy's template files, which we just mentioned a minute ago. So you can see they've all been divided into categories. We can try and figure out where is the page template file. And for lack of a better option, it's got to be in layout. Yeah, there it is. So I'm going to take the page.html.twig. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my theme, Leprechaun, paste it in the template file, in the templates folder. And now I've opened it in the code editor, and you can see all these comments I was talking about at the beginning. So the theme override to display a single page. The content HTML, the doc type HTML head and body tags are not in this template. Instead, they can be found in the html.html.twig template. Good to know. That's something I just mentioned. If you want to change anything in there, it's not in this file. So now we can see a list of the available variables that are in this file. Usually if I'm working with this, I'll just take all this out because I have enough experience that I know what's there, or you can look it up in the API documentation for Drupal if you forget how to get the base path, for example. So that's one of these general utility variables that are available in the page template file. There's a base path. If you want to make a link, you want to put that first. There's isFront. This is really useful if you want to do something different on this page. For the front page only, you can do that. You can do something different if people are logged in or not. Or if it's an admin, if the person has permission to access the admin area. The site identity, there's the front page. Here's a link to the front page. That's easy to output in Twig. The page template also has access to the full node, so that's also really useful. If you want to do something based on a certain node type, for example, you can access that information. And here are all the regions. Now, these are the default Classy regions. I want to change this, so I'm just going to get rid of all these comments because we're not going to use the same regions. Now, what were the regions that I had? We had a header, we had a main menu. I don't feel the need to put a breadcrumb in a second region. We're not going to use this highlighted. I'm going to call it admin instead of help. Let's see what else. There's the content. We only have one sidebar, so we're going to take this one and rename it. Get rid of the second one. Keep it simple. There. That's pretty much all we need to do. Oh, sidebar, not side that. There. So here's our basic page html.twig file. Now, in order for this to take effect, I have to go over to, I'm going to go over to my terminal, and I am going to clear the cache. If you don't use Drush, it's a really useful tool to do things like this. I don't have to annoyingly navigate to that performance page again. Oh no, I'm not in the right spot. Okay, this is set up with Composer, as my partner Liam described a few weeks ago. So we have to get into the web root, and hopefully this clearing will work. There. Okay, so now it should be using my page template that we just defined. There. Now, how can we tell? I don't know. Well, you know what? We're going to tell by going into the next step of the presentation here. We're going to enable theme debugging. So we can see how you can provide different template suggestions for different contexts. So the first thing we're going to do is enable theme debugging, and this is going to help us to see which template files we can provide and which suggestions are available in different situations. And then we'll see that we'll be able to see which page template file it's using. So what we need to do is to set up this thing called development services. This is probably something you're going to want to do on pretty much all of your development sites. I'm going to go into my sites directory, and here is my development services. I'm going to double check and make sure, nope, there's no settings.local in here. I'm just going to take a peek at this settings.php file. Usually I just copy one from another project. So what this is going to do is it's going to say that if I'm working locally, I'm going to use this settings.local file instead of if the file exists, settings.local. So this is something you'd set up just on your local development environment and not deploy to production or anything like that. And then it's going to do a bunch of stuff differently when you're working locally, such as using the development services. Okay, now I have a settings.local file. This will make us use the development services, which are usually, it's going to look for a WAP1 level right here. So here's development services. I'm going to open that in my code editor. Development services. So what I want to do is add in some parameters here that are going to tell it to use Twig debugging mode. And it's unfortunate that this is so esoteric, but that's the way things are right now. It's going to be super helpful. Now this is YAML. So remember we talked about last week that YAML needs to be really, really specific with its syntax. So I need to make sure there are 2 spaces. And hopefully that's right. It will complain at me if it's not. I'm going to clear the cache again. Now we will be able to see some nice information about our template files. There we go. Okay, back to our theme here. I'll reload the page. There. Now take a look at these comments in our code inspector here. You can see all these really nice things about the template files. So here is the start of our output from, or is this the end of our output? Yeah, okay. This is the beginning, the output from themes, leprechaun templates, page.html.twig. So this is telling us it's using our template file that we just copied over to the leprechaun theme. And it also has this really helpful information here. It tells us what the theme hook is, and that's what we will use in a preprocess function, which we'll talk about next time. And it gives me some file name suggestions. So here's some different page suggestions that we can use. So I could make a special page for the front page, for example. Now, like I said before, you probably don't need to use this very much unless you're really drastically making changes to your page layout for a certain situations. And I have had to do that before when a client wanted a microsite, for example, within the same Drupal site. So we made a page template suggestion that was going to be very, very different, completely different layout from the rest of the site. But otherwise, you hardly ever need to do that. And as we'll see in a few minutes, you can really do a lot with Twig conditionals too. So if you want to make some changes for a specific situation, a specific content type, a specific page, you can do a lot with conditionals rather than overriding the full template. So we can poke down in here. Here's that layout container wrapper that was in that page template file that we copied over from Classy. Here's the header region. So here it is. There's the theme hook is the region. It uses region html.twig. I find that I almost never need to override the templates for a region. It's just putting blocks in there. So there's hardly ever a need to override that. And here's the region header. And there's a block there. There's the branding block that comes standard with Drupal. So you can just dig down through everything and see all of the template files that are available. You can see that this is using block system branding block.html.twig, which is in the Classy theme. So this is giving you so much information about exactly where everything is. We didn't have this before. This is something that's been relatively new. It has been backported to Drupal 7, I believe, but you used to have to get this really kludgy develop themer module, and it was slow and clunky, and it was really hard to figure out exactly where you needed to go to override the HTML content. So if I wanted to, I mean, I probably don't want to do this, but if I wanted to override that HTML, I'd take this template file, I'd find it in Classy templates block, copy it over to my theme, clear the cache, and make whatever edits I wanted to make. So I think we're going to go on to a little bit more Twig. Hope that makes sense about the template suggestions. If you find, and I think we might need to add some content here, let's add a node. If you find that there doesn't seem to be a template suggestion for the situation that you need, it's okay. You can add one using a preprocess function, but we'll do that next time. So it's really infinite, the possibilities of what you can customize HTML for. You can create template suggestions for whatever situation you need. I find there's always a balance between maintainability and customizability. So you don't really want to make a bajillion template suggestions for no reason. You want to make a small change. There might be a different way to do that rather than, or, you know, using a condition, or there's something called Twig blocks, which can be used to extend or make small changes to a template file rather than sort of rewriting everything. So let's just create a test node here. We'll get some lorem ipsum. Oh, this website is right. Is it .com? Yes. HTML ipsum. Good way to get some placeholder content. Which one is the kitchen sink? Is this it? Yeah, that's the kitchen sink. We'll copy that. It's also really good to make sure that you have themed all of your basic HTML. I find that sometimes people just forget to do that. Like, I remember looking at some contrib themes, I'm like, they didn't theme block quotes, for example. Just make sure that everything's done. Okay. There's our test node. It's pretty obnoxious green, isn't it? So here's a basic node. We were going to look at some more Twig, and really the Twig really interesting things happen with Twig in a good content file like the node template. It's probably a lot of your customization with the HTML output is going to happen in a node template, for example, or a paragraph. If you use paragraphs module, I do a lot of custom theming with paragraphs. So let's remember where we were here. Some basic Twig. We can look at this right in the code file. We're going to hide and show some stuff. Now let's see. We're going to start by looking at what type of a node this is. What kind of content did I make? I think it's an article, right? So we're going to look at that node. Get down into the node here. Let's see, there's a field. Good way to customize the HTML output of fields is with the fences module, and that gives you a user interface in the field display to customize what HTML tag it's going to be using for that particular field in that particular view mode. So it allows you a lot of control over what markup that's doing at that kind of a level, and you don't need to make field template files for all these fields if you want to get rid of all the divs, for example. So where are we? We want to go up to the node. Okay, now this is an article. I'm going to make a template file for this article. So I can see that right now it's using node.html.twig. That's in Classy. So I can go over to Classy, copy that node file. I always copy. We never customize any code that's in core. Don't want that to get overridden when you update. So I'm going to take that, and here are all the different things that I could rename it. This is node number 1. So if I wanted a custom template file just for this particular piece of content, I can do that. It's using the full view mode. View modes are really, really useful. It's a really good way to do theming and handle the output of different content in different situations. And the node article, that's a pretty simple one. You probably want to keep these pretty simple if you can. So I'm going to customize this for the article content type. Let's go back to our file manager. We'll go back to core. There it is. Core, themes, classy, templates. Where's the node template? We can guess that it must be under content. And there's node. Okay, we'll copy that. Go back to our theme, leprechaun, templates, paste it. And we're going to rename it to node article. There. Now, I'm going to clear the cache again so that will get picked up. And reload. I'm going to make sure that it's using our new node template first. Let's see. Go up. Where's the node? There it is. Node article. It's using it. Good. Now we can make some changes. Go back to the code editor. Here is our code tree here. There's leprechaun. Here's the template, so here's our node article. And here are all the variables that are available in the node template file. All kinds of things. The node, the created time, is it published, the label, which is the title. I don't know why they don't just call it title, but okay. Well, I guess, yeah, okay. The content, the author picture, metadata, the date, the author name, the display submitted variable, whether that checkbox in your node edit content type settings says to display the submitted information. All kinds of interesting things. Content attributes. Okay, so this is where it starts to get interesting. So there's lots going on here. Classy has added all these classes. So what you see here at the beginning is actually setting a variable of classes. And it's adding all kinds of good stuff. It's making this into an array that's going to be printed out. Right here where it says add class, the classes. And we can add whatever we want here. We can say, I'm going to simplify this. I never use that promoted or sticky. I'm not going to, oh, sorry. Theme anything based on whether it's unpublished or not. So we're just going to simplify this, and this will simplify the classes that get put into the code and make it a little bit easier for us to figure out which one we need to use. If there's a view mode, it's going to add a view mode. That's pretty useful. What Classy is doing with this next line is that it's adding the library that it's defined for nodes only. So Classy, if you look in the libraries file, it's defined a separate library for pretty much each type of template file, which means that it's only going to load the CSS that it needs. And that also makes it easy for you to get rid of that CSS if you find that you don't need it, for example. Here's another a conditional. So this is saying, and you use these little percent signs here if you're doing something that's functional, like it's not outputting something, it's a conditional or a setting of a variable or something like that. So if it's not the page, this is the page is a variable that this template has available to it, and it tells you if this is a full page display of this node or if it's displayed in a view or another view mode, for example. So if not on a page, it's going to add this title. Otherwise, this is going to be displayed in the page title. And it's going to make it link to the URL for this node. And then it's going to display the label and end the if statement. So you can do a lot of stuff with conditionals here. You can say if it's this node type, then we have node.bundle up here. If you say if it's this node type, then do something different. So you can really use that a lot to avoid having to override templates a lot. And there's always kind of a trade-off between making more complex template files with lots of conditionals or just override that template file for that situation, and then it'll keep things simple. And there's always kind of a challenge to keep things well organized and consistent that way. So let's look at this display submitted section, and this is something that you'd really commonly want to customize. You don't want it to say submitted by, you want it to say something else. And in Drupal 7, you had to write a preprocess function to do that, but it was a really common thing that people wanted to change, and probably maybe one of the first things they wanted to change when they started using Drupal. I don't want it to say submitted by, maybe I don't want the author name there, something like that. I just want to put the date. You used to have to write a preprocess function, but now it's just right here, so I can just change that. I can say it's posted by somebody on a certain date. Whatever I want to do with that, I can change it. And you'll also see this trans here. So this is something Drupal has provided to translate. Something that's really important, it's a good practice, even if you don't think you're ever going to translate your site, is to run any kind of content you put here, put into your theme through a translate function. It's just the best practice. And what if I wanted to move that to the bottom? Maybe I'll move that to the bottom of the page. Let's save that and see what's happening. Here it was before, posted by admin. Reload. It's not there anymore, right? So it's using the new template file. Where is it? It's way down underneath these comments. How do we move the comments? That would be an interesting thing to do, actually. So that's going to be part of the content array. We want to move this submitted by date up above the comments. We want to keep the comments out of the way. So I might have to guess about where the comments are. What if I did this without comments? Now I'm going to guess that this is actually called just comments and not something else. Let's find out. Otherwise we're going to have to get Devel on. Nope, that's not what it is. Okay, we're going to have to drill down. Let me see if it says it up in the comments somewhere. Comments. No. But this is a useful thing to learn how to do. So what we're going to do is get some better debugging here for our twig arrays. Every time, yeah, Liam says every time I stream, something about my computer will screw me up. Yes, and we're doing it on here because we have all the screen catcher stuff set up on this computer, so we don't have to configure that again on my machine. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to install Devel, and then we will be able to use Kint debugging to drill down and see what that content array is actually called. Comments array. Let's talk a little bit about Twig filters while we're waiting for Devel to show up. So the pipe actually runs it through what's called a Twig filter. And if you look on the Twig filters documentation, we'll do a quick Google for that. You can see all these different ways that you can use for modifying data. Twig filters. There it is on Sensia Labs. And a lot of these things, if you're a PHP developer or if you've used PHP, you might recognize things like escape or encoding or keys. I don't know what those things do. You can find the length of the array that you're looking at. You can slice the array. You can replace things. You can strip the tags out of it. You can look for the first or the last element. The date is really, really useful. I was just helping someone on the Drupal forums yesterday try and figure out how to display something only if a certain date has passed, or hide something if a certain date has passed. So if, you know, he had an expiry date on a coupon site, so he was gonna do something different and say that it was expired if the date had passed. So you can do all kinds of interesting things with dates here. You can look at now, so that's what he actually had to do, is say if the expiry date that he had set on the coupon is past compared to now, then do something different. And this can also help avoid having to set up all kinds of wacky date formats if you have to display a date in a certain way. We should actually see if this works on the date that came out of the, that's already available to the node template. Let's see if that Devel is there yet. No. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about, and so you can just use the pipe to pass these through and check the documentation to see what kind of arguments you need, and that will just modify the output when you're posting that, displaying that variable in the template. Drupal has defined some custom ones. I'm going to go find those. Modifying variables in Twig templates. So, and here is Drupal's documentation page about how to use them. So here are some that Drupal has defined, and one of them is translation. So this is what you might do if you're, say, giving this link a title, home, you're going to translate it. You always translate it just as a routine best practice. One really good one is this clean class. So this is going to strip out all the spaces and special characters and make something that you can use as a class. And you can see that used in our node template here. Up here, see, you're putting the node bundle through a clean class. You probably actually don't need to. It's getting, no, actually, I'm not sure if that's getting the machine name or not. Might not be. So that's going to strip out any special characters. It's going to put any a dash, a hyphen in where there are any spaces and make it into a class name. So this is really useful for putting classes into your Twig templates. So I think that one and the translate are two of the really useful ones that Drupal has defined. I believe there's also a date one, format date, so it'll pass it to a date formatter in Drupal, which is really useful. Without is the one we were just using for hiding that comment. Now let's see if we have Devel yet. It's taking its sweet time. There we go. Okay. might have to enable Kint module separately. So Kint module will enable us to output the Twig debugging information directly from the template file. Okay, now that is enabled, and I can go in here and I'm going to try and figure out where those comments are. So I can just output Kint content. I think that's right. And it should give us all the deval information about this node. There it is. So we have an array. We can see exactly what's in this content array. Sometimes this is really slow. What's going on? Sometimes I end up with memory errors, and especially on my machine, I always end up with memory errors with Kint. And what you need to do if that happens is there is a config file in the Kint module, and inside that Kint config module, there's a maximum level setting. And this is by default set to 10 levels. So it's going to try and drill down into these arrays 10 levels, which tends to cause memory errors on some setups. So what I find is going into that config file and turning that down to like a 5 or a 4 can help solve some of these problems. In the meantime, we will go, oh, there we go. There it's back. Let's see if we will, there we go. This is much faster. Comment, not comments. Now, here we are back in our node article, so we can do it without comment. And then I want to display my comments further down underneath my submitted line. So we can just do the double swirly brackets, content, and we use a dot to go display the next level down in the array. There. Let's see what we have now. Okay. There it is. So now our comments are displayed further down in the template underneath the submitted by line. And we've done that using Twig. And I think that's probably all that I wanted to cover for today. How long have I been talking here? I don't even know. An hour maybe? Almost? So that's probably long enough, right? When did we get this working? Not an hour, 45 minutes. 45 minutes is a good length. There's really a lot you can do with Twig, and I've only just scratched the surface myself. There's a lot of information out there. It's nice to be off the island with this, so you can really tap into knowledge from other communities that have used Twig and have had more experience maybe than those of us using Drupal have. Let me just go back to my slides for a minute and see if there's anything else. Well, we talked about hiding and showing stuff. We use the without to hide the comment. If you wanted to do that with a field, you'd do it the same way. Like that. And you can add whatever you want in here to hide them and show them someplace else. Maybe you just want to use that field as a class. That could be something, or as a conditional, you want to use you might want to set a field to determine whether something is hidden or shown. That gives the author control over what's happening in the display of the content. That's a good idea too. So you can do really a lot of stuff with Twig. This is having an issue again. We also looked at accessing parts of an array. That's what we do with the dot here. So if I want to, access that field image, I would do the same thing. One thing to remember is that if anything is hidden in the field settings, the manage display settings, it won't be available to this template. So if you want to hide something from display, but use it in some other way in the template, it needs to be shown in those field display settings. So what I mean is if I go to my content type, if I go to manage display, you have to make sure that whatever way you want to access in your Twig template is shown here, even if you're not going to actually output it. It's an important thing to remember. And anything that's disabled or hidden is not going to be available to that template file. So we talked a little bit about setting variables. That's what happens with this set classes variable, and there's really a lot of stuff you can do with that too. If you want to really drill down deep into an array and do something with it, then it might be useful to set that as a variable, for example. And we talked a little bit about conditionals. So here's our example of a conditional. If it's not the full page, then show the title and end the if statement. And again, there's a lot you can do with that. You can, make a lot of changes to this template file based on the view mode, based on the node bundle, based on whatever kind of information you can get in here. So you can go and have quite a lot of flexibility there. And I think that is about it. We talked about filters. We talked about using without to filter out certain fields or elements in the array. We can also use that for the clean class. So there's the node bundle clean class. That's really useful too. And all kinds of things you can do with filters. So that's everything for today. Next time, in about 2 weeks, we will talk about the mysteries of pre-process functions. And that's something that I found to be really confusing when I first started to work with Drupal. I come from a front-end background. I'm not a PHP developer, so I didn't really get what the heck is this, a pre-process function, and why would you use one? And fortunately, that's a lot more clear-cut in Drupal 8 now that all of the HTML output is in a template file. Although, we'll get into the complexities of that next time. So thank you for tuning in.